Enough of this slander.
Because he had blood running from his anus.
Hate cripples? Like, what's going on here?
Beyond Thunderdome, baby. Oh, he was putting his sunglasses on there for like 15 minutes. What more does a man need?
Mongoli's movie madness, it's a sight to behold. Mongoli's passion for films never grows old. From classics to new releases, he's in the know. Mongoli's movies, let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to R Rating, the show where me and two of my friends are going to sit down, go through an entire movie franchise, discuss every single movie, break down the score, and put it on a wall where we will actually decide which movie franchise is the best, which one is the worst, and what kind of goes anywhere in between. Now, this being the first episode, Mad Max is going to be the default best and worst movie on the list, but eventually, over time, the board will start filling up, and it should be a lot of fun. So I'm going to bring on my guests. We've got Brian and Will. How are you guys doing today?
Super.
Excited to be here.
Excellent. Now, for Mad Max, this is the one that we came up with to do the very first time around. Brian, what is your experience with this franchise? Have you seen any of it before? Are you very familiar with it? Are you coming to this for the first time?
I had seen the entire franchise before. I've seen most of the movies multiple times. I hadn't seen any of them recently, but I went through them all in the past couple of days. And we'll get to whether what my current thoughts are. But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the whole franchise.
Fair enough. What about you, Will? I know when we talked, we had you on for the Flicks That Tick a little while ago, and you had Fury Road as one of your favorite movies of all time. Does the rest of the franchise live up there with that, or is it just that one?
Yeah, the rest of the franchise does not live up that high. It was a gem in the rough and a beautiful thing was made when Fury Road was put on the big screen.
Fair enough. For me personally, I have only ever seen Fury Road. My wife and I try to watch all the Oscar-nominated movies, and so back in 2015, for some reason, Fury Road was nominated for Best Picture.
Okay.
Enough
of this slander.
The slander would not be part of this recording. You're bringing stuff in from the past. So we watched that one.
No. That was clear slander. You said for some reason.
And we're off the rails. So that was the only one that I've ever seen, and that was the only time I've ever seen it. So I went through this franchise. I did not get to see Furiosa, but the other four movies I watched in order within the last 2, maybe 3 weeks. So Fury Road I've seen twice now. Everything else I've seen once. This has been an interesting ride for me. And I mean that legitimately. This is not quite what I was anticipating from this. So we want to break it down. We want to go into the first movie first and kind of go from there.
I believe that makes sense to me.
Fantastic. Now we can go back and edit this, but like, how do you legitimately want to keep this to like 15 minutes per movie? And how in depth do you want to go into like the discussion? We just kind of be like, here's my overall feelings. Do you want to discuss the film for people who haven't seen it?
Because the movies, aside from Furiosa that nobody saw, all the movies are relatively older. I don't think we have to go into great detail about the story itself. But I mean, that being said, some of these movies have some pretty cool scenes, especially the action sequences, which is what the genre we are on. So maybe some of that will come up naturally. But yeah, if you want to kind of stick to 15, this is your show, Dan. Do whatever the hell you want, man.
Yeah, you got to respect your time, though.
Yeah. Respect is earned. I've done nothing but made fun of you this entire time.
Which is what I expected, so.
So I like breaking down each movie individually, but I do want to cover the entire franchise as a whole and its fluidity and how they progress from one movie to another, because this franchise was very discombobulated as far as 1 and 2 and 3. It's like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, how they sort of overlap, sort of just recreate each other, sort of reboot one another, like sort of thing. I felt a little bit like that. So I think that needs to be addressed.
That's definitely one of the notes that I had, and I wanted to discuss with you guys, because I was just like, I don't know 100% what's going on here, and I just wanted to see if I just missed something or whatnot. Anyways, okay.
Okay, so Dan, you broke these movies down into some very diverse little topics, little arrangements.
Sure.
Starting from the beginning of the franchise with the first movie, you broke this down into some categories. What are those categories? How do they rank?
So what I was breaking it down into was music, cinematography, acting, plot, and just overall enjoyment, because I feel like that's really important. Whether like the music and stuff is bad or not, whether you enjoy a product really does matter. So that was a category I wanted to keep in there. The first movie, Mad Max from 1979, was a really, really interesting watch because I'd only ever seen Fury Road. So I went into this expecting post-apocalypse and nonsense, essentially. And it starts off kind of like that. Like all the cars are really well painted. So you're like, oh, this doesn't look post-apocalyptic, but like, you know, Knight Rider's running down the road and he's causing mayhem and whatnot. And they have to get Mad Max to come and intercept him, and you're like, okay, interesting. Like this isn't quite the look that I was anticipating, but you are kind of in the desert. And then as the movie goes on and on, it just confused me more and more. And I gotta say, this was one that I actually enjoyed way more than I thought I would. I thought this would be a painful watch, but I don't know how much I enjoyed this simply because I was so freaking confused the entire time. Like I'm expecting post-apocalypse, and all of a sudden there's a scene where they're talking about their lawyers and due process, and like, oh, he had his day in court, he's a free man, and I'm like, court? Like, what are we doing here? And then all of a sudden they go to like a hospital, and it is a clean, pristine hospital. And I'm just like, I can't figure out this movie whatsoever. Like, it seems completely lawless, like the world is breaking down, but I was anticipating it would already be broken down. Especially like at one point, she's like, I'm going to go for ice cream while we're being hunted by bandits. And I'm like, why on earth would that be a good idea? And she goes to the boardwalk and casually gets her ice cream, and oh no, bad things happen. I'm like, what the did you expect to have happen? Like, this movie just confused the hell out of me, but I gotta say, I was never bored. Like, I actually enjoyed this one. Again, maybe the second time through I would be, because I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. But when I was expecting one thing and I was given something so drastically different, I just found myself kind of glued to this, being like, when is this going to turn into what I think this is going to turn into? Now, you'd seen it before. How did it hold up for you?
For me, the second time around, I actually enjoyed it more. When the last time I saw this, I was really young, and it didn't appeal to me too much. I just remember, and this is a spoiler, so close your ears, but I just remember the final scene when Max loses his family. And that's all that really stuck with me. And so watching it again, I was like, oh, there's like a lot to this, you know? And you mentioned some of your list: music, cinematography, acting, plot, and enjoyment. The music, I noticed, and I'm not sure if that was a good thing or not, but I noticed that they put effort into this like really intense kind of dramatic sound to it all the time. And sometimes there was some dramatic sound that didn't really need to be there, but it was like, oh, okay, this is in my ear. And there was, like you said, a lot of kind of convoluted story. Like, how is this post-apocalyptic? But at the same time, it kind of felt like the world was breaking down, but they had law because of these kind of like cowboy police guys that are all in leather and souped up hot rods, and they're taking down the bad guys. And that's what was keeping the holding on to societal, you know, structure just barely. And but it was all starting to come apart, especially with this gang. So I guess it was kind of there, but you're right. It was really hard to feel for where it was at. But yeah, coming back around to it the second time, I did enjoy it more. There was a lot more to see. There was a lot more going on. But I did kind of feel like I kept waiting for that scene that I remembered from my childhood, and it doesn't happen until the very end. And then Max goes nuts and takes them all out. And it was like real quick. It was like a long story.
A lot of buildup.
And then all of a sudden, you're all dead. I'm going to get you.
What about you, Will? What did you think of this one?
I didn't have as much of a problem of not being a post-apocalyptic. It's like the society is crumbling, and you can see that. And I think it says why, like the oil wars and things like that. And it's like the society's on the cusp of going into the apocalypse, right? There's shortages everywhere. Nobody cares about the law anymore, but they're trying their best to like enforce what they can. And so that to me didn't bother me all that much. I think it's the other Mad Maxes, once he's mad and once they're fully apocalyptic, then the world is much different. I also think, you know, this is definitely like your first movie type of movie, right? Like this is his first time directing, writing, and putting on the big show, and that shows a little bit now when you watch it back. But I feel like you can still see the world he wants to create being formed here, which is kind of nice. And yeah, Mad Max, it's called Mad Max, and like he's maybe only in a third of the movie, because like the first part of it is mostly Goose driving around and doing his thing, right?
Oh, he was putting his sunglasses on there for like 15 minutes, man.
For sure. So it's like, I don't know, and maybe that's poor storytelling, or maybe it's like the slow build of like this is the multiple reasons why he kind of broke down and went mad. Brian dating the pinnacle moment of his madness, right, when his wife and child are no longer with us. So yeah, I don't know. Is it a great action movie? I don't think so. Does it hold up? Not really. But is it the seed of something that blossomed into better action movies? Absolutely. And I think from being the first movie George Miller did, you can see that he has a vision, and he just needs the time to get that right.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the police station and the police force and their little courtroom stuff? Because I felt like those guys were kind of over the top with their leather jackets. Their captain was walking around with his shirt off. He's all, shiny bald head and muscles out everywhere. And they were kind of intense with the big motors and all this stuff. And they kind of felt pretty intense. And then you also had the motorcycle gang, which was pretty intense. And everything else was just kind of, okay, we're supposed to be apocalypse, but all right.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of that?
The police station was one of the few things that actually did feel post-apocalyptic. Like every time it showed that sign, and like the I can't remember what was said on the sign, but the sign is like half hanging down and it looks decrepit. I'm like, okay, here we go. And then you go again, like to the hospital or something, and it's pristine, and you're just like, I don't understand this movie. I don't know where they're going with this. But you're right. Like the police were almost more of as much of a motorcycle gang than the actual bikers were. In fact, one of the notes that I have is like the motorcycle gang is more weird than they are scary. Like they show up to that town, and two of them start getting off in like ballroom dancing in the middle of the street. Yeah. I'm just like, what is happening in this movie? Like this movie was so all over the place, but I was kind of here for parts of it. Like it just shows you a bunch of random images, and it's like, here, you figure this world out. We're not going to tell you anything. You just, whatever you take from this, that's what you're going to get from this.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of like the zany characters, like obviously we're gonna plunge deeper into that as the movies go on, and I kind of love that about these movies. You get a taste of it here, as I said. Like this is just the beginning, and you just get a taste. So it's a little weird because it's like just borderline weird. Once it goes to like full insanity, characters are just full out crazy. That's when I really like enjoy these movies at their best.
Yeah, Toe Cutter was a pretty good villain. I kind of liked him. He was a little nuts. He was weird. He was in charge though, and he was a very memorable character.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't know if you guys know this, Dan and Brian. Same character as Fury Road. Not same character, same actor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Toe Cutter plays
Hugh Keys. I can't pronounce his last name.
Yeah. I did not know that. So he's Immortal Joe or whatever.
That's right.
Immortal
he plays the character of Immortal. Yeah.
Okay. No, I did not know that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
So in the first movie, you keep mentioning he lost his family. Am I crazy? Like his kid dies, but I could have swore they said his wife loses her legs, but she's going to make it. And then he just leaves her at the hospital and never goes back for it. I'm just like, she's still alive back there, bud. Like I'm almost positive.
I'm not. I thought that same thing, but I was wondering if what they were saying is he asks, is she salvageable? And I'm wondering if they were talking about like harvesting organs or like being a donor, maybe, because you're right. Otherwise, he walked out and she was going to make it, if that's what they meant. But I'm wondering if he meant that you could save some of the body parts, but she was a total loss.
Okay. I debated going back and checking that out because like the rest of the franchise, they never mention her again. And I'm just like, does he just hate cripples? Like what's going on here? Like what's...
I mean, it's Mel Gibson. I don't know.
Wow. Okay. I was going to leave him out of this discussion as much as I could, but yeah.
Fair enough.
The one part, like, as I said, this movie is just all over the place. I have more to say about this movie than the other ones. Don't worry, guys. We're not going to talk.
Okay.
Right near the beginning, there's the guy in the red car who gets run off the road by bikers, which right off the bat, I'm like, just swerve, buddy. Just start hitting them
Right.
with your car.
Yeah.
But he gets taken out, and the police show up, and he's running away with no pants on. I think we lost Brian. And if I'm not crazy, his butt's a little bit red, and maybe it's just me, but I'm kind of like, I think something happened here. And the cops are just like, what's going on with this turkey? Hey, you're a turkey. And I died laughing in my seat. I'm just like,
funny.
Great police work, guys. Love it.
Yeah, it was a little intense because he had blood running from his anus. I'm pretty sure, right? Like that's what it looked like to me. Like this guy had a bad day, and they're calling him Turkey as he's running. Yeah,
but I think that's kind of a part and parcel of the world that George Miller's creating here, right? Like there's all these kind of weird characters out there. Like everybody's kind of losing their minds and doing crazy things. The police have to like choose their battles of like, what's important at this moment? This turkey running through the field, or like some hot pursuit that we have to figure out and like stop before they massacre a bunch of people, right? So I think it's like part of that world building that I think he really grows into later, but it's just like pieces and parts.
It did. I mean, it did showcase some pieces of extreme violence. You see rape and murder, and it's pretty graphic. So that really, those sequences really added spice to the movie for me. Though they didn't necessarily make sense, they were impactful as a viewer.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Do we want to break down make up our scores for this one, and then we'll move on to the next one, and then have our totals by the end? Or why
don't you guys give me your score system, and I'll pare it back my version of your score system.
One sec.
Because Dan, you said music, cinematography, acting, plot, and overall enjoyment.
Yeah.
Okay. And Will, what did you have?
But again, you do not have to use my system.
Yeah, you don't have to use what I'm using, but I broke down a little differently. I put genre in there specifically. If this is like an action movie, I want that action genre to be front and foremost.
Okay.
The acting, writing, direction, and then just overall, if the movie holds up, watchable over and over again kind of thing.
Okay.
All right. So for Mad Max 1979, the original, for the music, it was nothing special, but it felt perfect for the world that we were in. Like it was just heavy guitar riffs. It was just loud and vibrant. And it was just kind of like, yeah, this is what I would expect this to be. Like it didn't stand out to me as being positive or negative. The one thing that this entire franchise is lacking is a coherent theme. Like when I think Jurassic Park, I instantly get that music. Indiana Jones, I instantly get that music. Maybe I'm wrong. I could not for the life of you tell you a single, like Mad Max doesn't have a theme. Like he shows up and it turns into a certain song.
Right.
So I gave this like a 60, right? Like it's fine. It's serviceable. It's not memorable in any way, shape, or form. It's fine. The cinematography, as you mentioned, this is his first movie. Like he's just cutting his toes on this one, or whatever that phrase is.
Toe cutter.
Right? I wonder if that like influenced it, but it's like I think. Anyways, cut his teeth. Anyways, whatever. He's just figuring it out. It's fine. I gave this a 60 for that as well. For the actual acting, I gave it a little bit lower because some of the biker gang, like most of the biker gang is a literal biker gang. Like the extras that played this gang were just bikers, and they literally had to wear their costumes on their way to work every day. They had like cards from the directors are like, please don't arrest me, police officer. I'm going to be in a movie. Like, this is not real. I gave it like 55. Plot, honest to God, like, is there one? Not really.
Yeah, there is.
Like,
it's a very simple plot, but there is a plot.
What is it? What is the point of this movie? Not the world. What is the point of the movie? It's the
revenge of the biker gang that escalates to the point where they finally piss off Max and make him Mad Max. It started with they run Knight Rider off the road, and they keep going back and forth, and the cops are trying to get him, and then they're trying to get the cops, and it just continues to escalate until finally they take out Max's family, and he goes nuts and kills them all.
Yeah, it's a simple story.
So it's a revenge leading to
madness.
Revenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Escalation to revenge.
I gave this one pretty low in plot. I gave it a 40.
Sure.
And then for overall enjoyment, shockingly high. I actually thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I'm not saying it was like the best thing I've ever seen, but I walked into an action movie and I feel like I got an action movie. So that was actually my highest score. I gave that one 75, which means the movie overall, I gave it 58.
Okay, that's not bad. I'm somewhere in the zone.
Okay. IMDb puts us at 68 or 6.8. Sorry, so
yeah,
little lower than IMDb average, but not terrible. So, Will, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go next. I do want to ask you one thing. How much plot is in the average action movie that you're looking for?
I guess that's a fair enough argument. I feel like, generally speaking, the main character is trying to accomplish something or wants something. And in Mad Max, spoilers, all of them, I never get the impression Mad Max is trying to do anything. He's just kind of walking down the street and something happens to him. And he's like, all right, I guess I'm doing this now.
Yeah,
like, at no point is he like Indiana Jones has a goal. He's trying to do something. John McClane is generally trying to do something. Something bad happens to him and it messes up his day, but he's got a point that he's trying to do. You know exactly what he's working towards. During these movies, like from minute to minute, it's just kind of like, oh, we're just watching what's happening. I don't really know where he's trying to go or what he's trying to do or what he's trying to accomplish other than not die.
Right. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I just wanted to put it out there just to...
Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
Because I do feel that action movies in general have, you know, a much simpler plot line than most. Like the story arcs are pretty straightforward. But you're right. Mad Max is mad. That's his whole go. So like the story is pretty convoluted most of the time for like A to B to C. All right. So I just went like, we're ranking out of 100 total. So I kind of just gave 20 points for each of my little sections. I'm not going to go over them all. I'm just going to hit you with my number.
Sure.
But thinking on genre of action, acting, writing, direction, and if the movie holds up, watch after watch, year after year, I threw Mad Max at a 65 out of 100. The reason being, it does give off the first movie vibe. This is a novice writer, director, producer. He threw his hat in on all of these things, and I think that shows a little bit. But I do see the potential in the movie, and there's a lot of great elements in it that maybe just didn't quite hit the mark. So yeah, for Mad Max, I'm just going to give the final score through genre, acting, writing, direction, and if it holds up kind of time after time, year after year, if you watch it again and again. And overall, I feel Mad Max scored a 65. It's a decent action movie. It's not great. It gives kind of first-time filmmaker vibes, but there's a lot of potential and there's a lot of like fun elements in it. I do like that there's like this weird comedic element in these movies, and yeah, that's kind of where it's going to sit for me.
Fair enough.
Okay, so
Brian, you're making this up as we go.
Yeah, utilizing similar criteria as you guys, I kind of ran down, and I ended up with a score of 57. I think you guys were rating pretty high for some of the things that you didn't like. Like you got to be ready to be critical, man. So I wasn't as big a fan of the music and the scoring. I noticed it was kind of loud and in my face, and it seemed kind of intense when it didn't need to be. Like they were trying to add drama to some really just slow panoramic scenes kind of stuff that felt just wasteful to me. The cinematography was fine, but like Will says, it felt new. You know, it felt like some new shots, nothing groundbreaking or anything. It was pretty good. I thought the acting, aside from Mel Gibson, was actually pretty good. I liked the crazies, and I felt like these characters were genuine. Aside from Mel Gibson, he felt like a robot to me. He didn't feel mad at all. Even after he lost his family, he didn't feel like Mad Max. And honestly, I'm going to be saying that about Mel Gibson throughout the entire Mel Gibson portion. He never felt mad to me, like a mad, crazy person. As far as the plot goes, I thought it was very linear, very straightforward. It just built up, escalated. Then you pissed him off and he kills everybody off. There was nothing to it. It didn't draw me in. I wasn't waiting to see what happens. If I didn't know what was going to happen, I wouldn't have been as interested in it, you know, but I kept waiting for his family to get clipped off. And that took forever, it felt like, and I wouldn't have been that interested had I not known about that. However, overall, for whatever reason, and maybe it was because I enjoyed the biker gang character so much, Maybe it was kind of the hot rod cars. Maybe it was just the ridiculous Aussie accents and the over-the-top crashes that kept happening for no reason. But I enjoyed it a lot. I kind of really just enjoyed it. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
And that really brought up my overall score. I gave it a 57.
Okay. So that's what I thought. I thought you said 57, but you criticized us for being too high. And I'm like, I'm 1 point higher than you are, bud. But sure. Okay.
But that's because my enjoyment came in way high
Oh.
and brought it up. And for no reason at all. Honestly, I thought that the captain was hilarious and the characters were just over the top and they brought some color and vibrance to this weird movie.
Yeah. Same. My enjoyment is what brought this through the roof, or as high as it did at least, because everything else was pretty mediocre. The music, one of the things I had in my notes, and it might have been because the music has kind of triggered as you were saying that, this movie, again, maybe because I'm expecting the apocalypse, everything about this movie felt really ominous. Like every time, like when she's like, hey, I'm just gonna go get some ice cream down the
Right.
bay, like everything in the back of my neck is like, oh,
Right, you
don't
got
do
the
that.
tickles, yep.
When she goes to the beach, the back of my neck is like, don't, this is bad. So like in that sense, I thought it did a good job. Anyways, that's your score. Fantastic. I will average those out and we'll get that figured out. So we'll know
And
at
then we
least
got
what
to
first
average
movie
the
is.
whole franchise too, right?
Yeah. So that's looking like a straight up 60 for the first movie, which is not terrible.
It's right on par with like Internet Movie Database and stuff, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to the second movie. This one takes the turn that I assumed we were going to get from the very beginning. This one starts off with a narrator.
Talking about the oil wars.
First off, yeah. So this one's called The Road Warrior in the States. It's Mad Max 2 in Australia, apparently, but they figured Mad Max bombed in North America. So like, well, no point naming it after a sequel no one saw. So changed the name to The Road Warrior. Came out 2 years later. Pretty decent jump in budget on this one. Gave them a bit more room to work with. And it starts off with a narrator talking about how the world has now kind of gone to crap and things have happened. I don't think they mentioned like nuclear waste in this one. I think you were right. They were talking about like being like the oil dried up and a lot of the engines stopped working. And that's what kind of put us in the situation that we're in. But it's not till later that they mentioned like, oh no, like the world has been scarred from nuclear waste and bombings and stuff like that. This movie was bone simple, but bananas, just way out there compared to the first one. I mean, the first one's out there, don't get me wrong, but at least you're like, this is out there, but it's like, you know, maybe this is a state I've never been to. This, the Road Warrior, now you're like, okay, no, this is a whole different world. This is a different time that we're in for real this time. Will, we'll start with you. What did you think of this one?
I enjoyed this one. I mentioned before, Mad Max was like a starter. It was like an appetizer to your palate. This one, you're full into the wild mind of George Miller and his crazy world that he wants to place you in. And you see it here, I think, fleshed out. The characters are even crazier. Feral kid and what have you. It's just like, it's absurdity. And in all the best ways, I think. So this one rates a lot higher for me. I think they hit the marks a lot better on this. And they amped up the action as well. Like you had a taste of it, a few car chases, but like you said, they were like, what, you know, not quite sure what's going on in some of those action sequences. Whereas this one, like there is some choreography going on in here. And like, it's not easy to pull off. You can see it. The stunt work and everything is like amped up to the umpth degree. Again, story-wise, you know, I think Mad Max, you're gonna feel like the stories are gonna be a little bit of an afterthought. They give you the bare bones to get you the action you want to see, and that's kind of what I feel is the overarching message with Mad Max. If you're going into one, like that's what you want to tell people. But yeah, I like this one quite a bit. Do you want me to rate it right now? Because I'm happy.
No. We'll go through everything and then we'll do the ratings at the end.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just feel like this one is just like, okay, we got George dipped his toe in the waters of filmmaking, and now he's like diving in. You know, he's like, okay, let's just make this happen.
That's not what I wanted. Yeah, that's totally fair. For me personally, this one was exactly what I was. No, sorry, that's a lie. This one was more what I was anticipating it being. But there are certain parts of this I don't think you could have anticipated. Like when Humongous shows up and like the big bad guy is a gimp in a Jason mask, and you're just like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Am I supposed to be afraid of this guy? Like, is this is the big bad? Okay. For anybody who hasn't seen it recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, this movie is Mad Max just driving down the road, comes across a town with an oil tanker that is maybe one of the last drills that's still working. It's being besieged by another bike gang run by this Lord Humongous, I believe his name is, and he decides to try and get some of the oil for himself, ends up trying to help the people leave the oil town and head south to safety, so they think. In the meantime, he runs into I think his honest to God name in the movie is Gyrocopter. I don't think he actually has a name. I think it is just like Gyrocopter Captain
the gyro
or something.
Captain, yeah. Bruce
Yeah.
Spence.
Gyro Captain, there you go. Who we do see again in another movie. We'll get to that later. And it's again, it's just kind of stuff happening. Like there's not much going on in this one plot-wise, but I don't know. I found this one less exciting than the first one. Maybe not exciting, that's not the right word. I found this less engaging than the first one, because the first one I was just constantly like, what is going on? Whereas this one you're like, oh, this is what's happening. Like I feel like you could pinpoint it really quickly, and then it just stuck to those expectations for a long time. Not that it was boring necessarily, just that it wasn't as like, I wasn't as engaged. The one yeah, anyway, so what do you think, Brian?
So I liked everything about this one better. I felt like they took all the best stuff from Mad Max the original and they turned the volume up on it, and they gave you more of what you liked, and they kind of fleshed out some of the inconsistencies. Like, it was definitely an apocalyptic world. We start off with a narration at the beginning, which we didn't even need. I felt that was superfluous. They should have left that out, because right off the bat, he's, in the car chase, he runs the guy off the road, and then he's going and he's like scooping up the fuel that's pouring out. And you see how desperate they are for fuel. And so we didn't need that explanation about it. And you can see with your own eyes that it's apocalyptic. Everybody's lost their minds and society's kind of gone down. And so I kind of liked that a little bit better. I wish they would have that narrating. And I felt like there was a bit more plot in this one. We were going from a scene to a scene. Like, he's just a scavenger trying to survive. But as he goes through, he comes up to a point of conflict that forces his hand in a decision, and he has to go one way or another. And so I felt it had an evolving plot rather than this just linear build up to him getting pissed off, right? This was him just wanting to be left the F alone, and he keeps getting drawn back into this problem, this situation that's going on. And it was much more entertaining for me to have that up and down roller coaster of a plot. Not that it was a thick plot or anything. It wasn't amazing, although there is somewhat of a twist ending at the back end, right? And I'm not sure if some people caught that or not, because like, I'm watching it and I was like, they didn't really stick the landing on that twist ending. So, spoiler here, Mad Max takes the tanker of what he thinks is fuel to escape to the grasslands or whatever they were calling. I forget what they're calling in this one, the paradise land. And come to find out, he's got a tanker full of sand, and everybody else has the fuel in their cars, and they're making the getaway, and he was just the bait. And all along, they were trying to get somebody to drive the tanker to lure everybody away. And that was kind of the twist ending. Now, if you watch it, you actually see a point when they actually accidentally break a nozzle off of the tank and it's pouring sand out in advance of the big reveal. And then, of course, when Max tips the tanker over and sees that it is, he doesn't do a stellar job of looking all that surprised, though he is. But I just didn't think they stick the landing on that big plot reveal, and they could have made it better there. So overall, they took the best parts of the first movie and they turned the volume up. They gave us these crazy, crazy characters, crazy outfits, crazy cars, and they gave it a little bit more plot, a little bit more reason for him to be going and everything. And they did touch more on him being the Mad Max, you know, and they even say, "Oh, what's the matter? You lost your family or something?" And they get in a little brawl over it, and like he's kind of upset.
Everybody has. Get over it.
So yeah, so I felt like it was the same movie, but a lot better and in almost every way, except for the music, which was totally unforgettable. I didn't even notice it. I didn't hear it. It did nothing for me. The scoring just kind of was like a total afterthought, if anything. So yeah, this one got a higher overall score for me.
Now, I was kind of thinking that Mel Gibson probably knew that he was bait, and that's why he didn't seem terribly surprised.
That could have been it
Because
too.
it'd be pretty hard. Yeah, it could be pretty hard because they've got like tanks everywhere on their cars filled with gas. He'd have to be not paying attention pretty badly to not notice that.
And I wasn't sure if that was the case or not, but they sure fooled the bad guys, you know, which they shouldn't have if the bad guys are paying attention. There's sand pouring out the rig as it's going down the road.
Yeah, I feel the same way that Max was actually in on that plan, if not maybe the plan maker. Like Max strikes me as like always one of the smarter characters in the room, and he's just like, I don't know, maybe this is like the way I see Mad Max films is like he's a wanderer survivor who stumbles into situations where he has to morally decide if he's going to help or hinder people.
Mm-hmm.
And he more often than not chooses to help those in need. And so like all these stories, all these movies are this like instances where he stumbles upon these problems and decides what to do from there. Does that make for the most intriguing plot? Maybe not, but as an overarching, you kind of get a feel for who the character is, and he's like this hero folklore character that everybody's telling stories about, which is also why I think they started with the voiceover and end with the voiceover in this movie, as this is a retelling of this epic stranger in this survival wasteland who helped this community.
Which, as we talk about, they lean into that in the next movie too.
And I think they lean into that kind of from this movie on, being more of a storytelling of this crazy stranger that helps everybody in need.
Did you guys know that the tanker was going to be full of sand?
No,
I think you're right.
When it happened, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like it is a twist on like, oh, this is how they fool the bad guys, and we're not letting the audience in on it.
Right.
But was it the best reveal? Probably not.
No, it was terrible considering that I'm confused as to who was in on it and who wasn't.
Exactly.
So
that's telling.
I think that they could have made that spectacular. There's a Hitchcock movie where some bank robbers steal a fuel truck and they drive out into the desert and die of thirst, and all along it was a water truck, Right. And that's amazing, and they didn't pull that off in this one, and so it lost points there. But once again, thoroughly enjoyed it. Humongous was a fantastic character again, just over the top crazy. I liked his dog on the leash kind of guy was really cool. What brought it down for me was the acting of the people in the refinery camp. They were terrible. They were some of the
overacting.
Worst. Yes, overacting all throughout that. It was terrible. And once again, Mel Gibson's performance, though better than the first one, was still pretty subpar. Not great for him. I really, we'll talk when we get to Fury Road, where I think it was brought out much better with even fewer words.
Yeah. I should have written down. There's something I was going to mention going back on that one. Oh, sorry. I found what happens to Humongous. Like, I found him, as much as he was like interesting looking, I found him so forgettable. I honestly couldn't even tell you how he died. So Mad Max does a U-ey and starts driving back, and Humongous hits the nitrous on his ride to catch up to him, and he crests the hill and runs into Mad Max and the dog on the leash guy. I can't remember what his name was. He's riding on the front of the truck, and so Humongous smashes into him and kills everybody, and then Mad Max tips the truck over in one big fireball-y explosion at the end, Gotcha. Okay. So the thing is, so you were mentioning that this didn't really need a narration at the very beginning. I'm wondering, like, are the Mad Max movies some of the very first post-apocalyptic movies or entertainment that we get. Because like nowadays, you've got Fallout, you've got Borderlands, you've got Waterworld, you've got the Mad Max franchise. Like it's familiar territory for us. How many other options like this were there in 1981? Did they think like maybe people will walk into this just confused, especially if you've seen the first movie, which does kind of take place in the desert? Like, how did everything go this far down? Like nowadays, you watch this and like, especially like Humongous, you watch that and my brain instantly goes to Borderlands. I don't know if they
Well,
ripped
now
that
it
guy
does, yeah.
exactly or something very
Yeah.
close. Well, exactly. But like watching this in 2024, I mean, but like if you watch this in 1981, what do you have to compare this to?
Good point.
Yeah, I think this world that Miller created was pretty out there. You're like, you can think like heavy metal or something like that. Like there's some very stylized and weird characters in that. Like that's what it kind of feels like to me, which I think at its time was relatively new. I'm trying to think of other things like maybe a Clockwork Orange.
Okay.
So there's things out there, but I think like he's building this crazy world and like he's not holding back. It's just like weird and twisted all
Just
the way
lost you
through.
guys again.
Oh, I still have
got
you.
me?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
we still have you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back. All right.
Okay, so Will, do you want to start us off with your score for
Yeah.
the Road Warrior?
Yeah, this one bumped quite a bit for me. I think he shook off the first film and learned a lot from it. And I think it as a pure action movie, there's a lot to enjoy in this movie. So I bumped this one up pretty high. It's an 80 for me.
Wow. Okay. Brian, what about
This
you?
one came up a couple of points to a 61 for me. I liked the Humongous character way more than you did. I thought he was memorable to me. His line of "just walk away" is something I've always remembered since the first time I saw the movie. And it was the townspeople that brought it down. It was the scoring, which they went from over intense in the first one to almost non-exact. I couldn't even tell you what the sounds were in this one. They just weren't there. And I wish that they would have brought in some of that scoring to accentuate the movie a little bit more. It was mostly just the sound of nitrous and squealing tires.
That's totally fair. The one thing I will fight on that is the boomerang sounded amazing. I loved the sound of that thing flying through the air. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go the opposite direction. This one actually dropped a little bit for me.
Really?
I actually enjoyed this less than the first one. This is, I mean, spoilers, I guess. My least favorite of the Mad Max movies.
What was wrong with it? What bothered you the most?
Oh, the enjoyment just was not there for me. Whereas the last time the enjoyment bumped it up significantly, the enjoyment was pretty low on this one, where I just found myself, I desperately tried not to, but I just wanted to look at my phone for large chunks of this movie. Whereas the first one, I was just like, I was so admittedly baffled, but I was so intrigued, like, what is going on? Whereas I feel like I had this one fairly pegged pretty quickly. So the enjoyment on this one was only a 40, whereas the last one was like a 75.
Wow.
Everything else, like the acting was a little bit worse. You're right. The townsfolk were terrible. The music was a little bit worse. Because I kind of like as bad as the music was in the first one, it felt like it fit the world. Whereas this one, I don't recognize it either, other than the boomerang sound. That was cool. Plot again, like pretty razor thin. Like I could tell you what the plot of this one is easier than the first one, so I did bump it up a little bit, but it was still pretty low for me. But the fact that I just didn't enjoy this one nearly as much as the first one, or the other ones after this, so that kind of hit it a little bit. No, it didn't drop significantly. It went from a 58 for the first one to a 51 for this one, but it does bring it down a little bit.
Oh man, my ranking's holding this high.
That's fine. I kind of figured you would enjoy these movies higher than I did in general. So
yeah, I mean, I do have a bias of like, I love practical effects. I love stunt work.
Here.
For those people who don't know me, I had my own theater company where we did spoofs of action movies on stage. So like, I'm quite physical in that way. So like, I grew up with martial arts movies. So like, physical stunt works, practical effects always are going to have a little place in my heart. And like Mad Max, for the most part, it's hard to fault them on those things.
I will say I did give the cinematography higher props for this one because that car scene or the car chase was very long. all practical effects, really, really well done. Like that was very cool. And especially for being in 1981, like they really just had to do everything that you see on screen. There was no way to fake most of that other than like crash test dummies versus human bodies. But other than that, like they wrecked a lot of cars making this movie. And I do appreciate that.
And when they blew the town up, man, that was a big blow up scene. I love that. That was a big boom right there. So I love when they put a lot of TNT into a shot like that. So that was cool.
Fair enough. All right, jumping ahead to 1985's Mad Max
Beyond Thunderdome.
Beyond
baby.
the Thunderdome. Is it? There's no the. It's just Beyond Thunderdome.
Beyond Thunderdome. Yeah, because what's Beyond Thunderdome? I
thought that would be a bigger question in the movie, and then it just wasn't.
Yeah, it's
but,
just okay. just a not good movie. That's all.
The Gulag was Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh my goodness! All right, Brian, why don't you start this one?
I think this is Brian. I think this is yours to start.
Okay. The music was so much better in this one. There was music. There was songs. They had the pounding hammers, the theme stuff as he's going through Border Town. They had lots of climatic music that just rose whenever they were gonna, drop bombs on somebody or cars were gonna collide or something. The music got loud and intense, and there was guitar riffs, and the music was 100 times better in this one. So
they had Tina Turner.
They had Tina Turner. Right? I'm pretty sure she even sang a couple of the songs that were playing in there.
She wrote 2 songs.
She wrote 2 songs. Okay, I was kind of like, as I was watching, I was taking some mental notes. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's another one. Right? Yeah, so the music was so much better in this one. I really liked that iron clanging kind of as they're going through the Atomic Cafe and stuff. So that was actually really cool. They really turned it around on the music part. As far as the cinematography and everything, another improvement here. They had some aerial shots as the cluster of vehicles were driving. They had swooping cameras around the Beyond Thunderdome. They had, as they're in Thunderdome, you have lots of hard shots as they're swinging around and flipping and going back and forth. Mel Gibson's flying at the camera or flying away from the camera. Then they're riding on a train, and you've got train sequences where there's lots of coming at you, going away from you, airplanes flying, lots of tough angles that they pulled off, and I thought did a much better job there. The acting, again, another notch up, right? We see Mel Gibson starting to kind of come to life in the role, right? He's got a little bit more character. He's got a little bit more of, you see his personality. You can see when he's with the children, he's relating to them in his own way. You can see that they're kind of touching him, and he wants to take care of them, but he has no idea how to take care of children in this crazy world. And so I felt like I could understand his character a little bit more. Still not mad. He's not going crazy or anything, but he was definitely there more. Tina Turner kind of let me down a little bit on this. I loved her character, and she had some great lines, but there wasn't a lot for me to go on. She actually didn't really have that many roles. I mean, like her role wasn't very big in it. She was big, and she had some great lines, and I love the idea of her character, but I wanted more of her, like maybe a backstory on her. I don't know. Maybe we'll get Tina Turner Road coming up or something. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe we'll revisit that. I don't know.
I hope not.
But
no.
I wanted to
Auntie Road.
I don't know.
I want Auntie Road for the name
I wanted
now.
more of her because I just didn't really get a feel for her, and she just had these kind of clever lines and stuff. And then all of her henchmen were totally replaceable. I don't know why they had the same guy with a little voodoo doll over his head all the time. He was just totally interchangeable with anybody else. There was one guy who was kind of goofy, and he walks up on him in the pig farm. And he's like, hi, and then he runs away. He had some sort of character to him, but he was just a goof, I guess. So the henchmen and stuff, the children were amazing, and I have trouble with child actors. I thought the kids were fantastic with their little cult and their own language and everything, and they had this whole little society going on, and the way they told the stories with the little TV stick and stuff, really cool there. So I thought the acting definitely went up overall. And then as far as the plot, I did not know where the movie was going to go. I mean, I've seen it several times, but I never knew where it was going to go. One of the biggest plot holes in the movie that I didn't understand, and unless you saw the original Mad Max, you wouldn't make this kind of connection. But in the original Mad Max, was it like his brother or his cousin or something who had Down syndrome, that big guy, right? And so when he knocks off Blaster's helmet and he sees that he's a mentally challenged or a Down syndrome person, I'm not really sure, there, I know that there maybe is a connection to his past, and that's why he couldn't bring himself to smash the guy to pieces. But if you didn't see the original Mad Max, you would not know that that character was ever in his life or make that connection at all. And it would just be like, okay, like this is a big guy that was trying to kill me, and he's obviously being taken advantage of and manipulated by these people to do their bidding. But I don't know why, it wasn't enough for me to really understand. So that was kind of a thing. And then overall enjoyment, I thought just the movie was a very entertaining. Big cars, big collisions, big fight scenes, lots of fun stuff happening all the time. The sequence when he takes all his guns out at the door, all his weapons, then it's like a full 45 seconds of him just pulling weapon after weapon out onto the countertop was great. Very
and it's not even all his weapons.
It wasn't even all his weapons, right? He's always got a backup. Yeah. And they bring back the gyro captain, and this time I think the kind of. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. That was a plot hole there. I didn't understand that. And the gyro captain's son, which I think was supposed to be the kid with the boomerang from the last movie, maybe.
I wondered about that too. I don't
know. Like, I would have liked a little more explanation about them. I did love those characters. The father-son dynamic there was fantastic. Dad. It was just great. It was a great character. So I enjoyed this movie a lot more. It definitely still had some problems. It wasn't as good as I remembered it from the past. And even my kids were watching it. My oldest was watching it with me, and he noticed some cinematic errors in there. Like, Tina Turner jumps down into the Thunderdome and gives a little speech. And in like the next scene, she's back up on her perch. And like, okay. He noticed that. And it was like, it tore me out of the movie. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I hate those little things that tear you out of a movie. And there were actually a couple in that movie that happened that kind of tore me out, and they just didn't sequence it right. So overall, the movie definitely improved in a lot of ways. It needs a lot more polish for me, and I would have liked to have seen more from Tina Turner.
Fair enough. So for me, this one jumped up significantly, like especially after watching The Road Warrior and being kind of down on it. I was like, I don't know what to expect from this. Walked into this one, and it's still a very similar movie. Like, it's almost like they're remaking. So one of the things I want to get into later on is just kind of like, is Mad Max an actual character, or is he just pure legend?
Right.
Which, again, we'll discuss that later on. This movie starts off, he ends up in Bartertown, and everything about Bartertown I absolutely loved. Like, that whole sequence I just had a ball with. The thing with this movie that I found is it seems like everybody in this movie knew what movie they were in, whereas the last two movies, it felt like they were kind of like, this person's being really wacky and this person's being really ominous. You don't really know what's going on. Everybody in this movie seemed like they were on the same
culture,
page.
Society, yeah.
Right. And now Tina Turner, I didn't love her actually, but her henchmen, you said they were replaceable. I actually really liked them. I thought, not the voodoo guy, but whoever the guy was, like, the monocle.
He was good.
Felt like he was
good.
He would do exactly what movie he was in. He was playing it perfectly. He did a great job. Master Blaster, again, for me, I just look at that and I go, that is straight out of Borderlands. And then I have to remind myself, no, Borderlands took it from this. Like 100%, this is what came first. Where I saw it, Mad Max, I mentioned, had a very ominous tone. Like, every scene, you're kind of like, oh man, what's going to happen here? This movie had an oddly comedic tone to it. Not that it was a comedy, but that every single scene, you're just like, that's kind of funny. Like, I'm not laughing out loud, but it's like, that's interesting. Like the weapon scene that you mentioned, like, oh, leave your weapons here. And it's just like pulling gun out. And I'm like, this reminds me of like maybe Men in Tights or something along those lines. Like, totally like a spoof movie. Yeah. But again, I have to remind myself, this might have been the first time that this has ever happened. Like, I can't think of a movie older than 1985 with a scene like this.
Mel Brooks was doing things around there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've never seen Blazing Saddles, so fair enough. If that happened in that movie, I've never seen it.
Well, Mel Brooks takes it way further, of course.
Yeah.
But
sure. Master Blaster, the design of him, I thought was so much cooler than Humongous. Ridiculous, but cooler.
Yeah.
I didn't hit against. I totally forgot about his cousin or whatever in the first movie. So when his helmet came off and it showed that he was just like had a child's mentality, essentially, my brain just assumed Mad Max is a good person and not relating it to anything. But you bring up a good point that I hadn't thought of. Like that could absolutely be a tie that they're trying to connect. I didn't remember that, and I watched these movies maybe like a week apart or something. I just assumed Mad Max can see this person, see, oh, clearly this is not like the enemy I thought I was fighting. I can't kill this person. I thought it was weird that he instantly says directly in front of everybody, like, that wasn't our deal. Like, dude, that could have been a little subtler. You could have, I'm not killing a child or something, and then talk behind shadows.
But they needed to get to the wheel. You bust a deal.
Yeah,
you
for sure.
Exactly. You spin the wheel.
You needed that to progress it. Could they have done it smoother? Of course.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what needed to happen for the story. But is like, if you're watching this thinking this is a real world, that's a moment where you're like, oh, you're dumb. Okay, fair enough. The harnesses in the Thunderdome were very odd, but I actually kind of liked it. Like it just kind of like fit the world of like, no, this is just a weird world. They do things differently. Like that's totally fine with me. And then they left Bartertown, went out into the desert, and not that they did a poor job, the kid actors did a poor job, but I just found myself less engaged with the movie at that point. Like I just cared less about Captain
Walker.
Whatever the heck falling from the sky, Captain Walker falling from the sky, and all that nonsense. The plane was a very cool image. The plane like half buried in sand, that was really cool. Don't get me wrong. And it was interesting seeing this little society that they carved out for themselves, but I just didn't see myself caring with that. And then when they went back to Bartertown, I was like, all right, here we go again. Didn't quite reach the highs that the first half of the movie did, or the first however long of the movie did. I really, really enjoyed all of those images or sequences. It just kind of brought it down a little bit, just slowed it down a little bit. And then at the very, like, I don't know, I'm trying to go off my notes here, but I wrote less notes for these ones than I did the first one. At the very end, Mad Max gets into a car accident, right? And Auntie walks up to him and is like, you're finished. And then turns around and walks away.
See you around,
just
Raggedy Man.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, you got me. And I'm just like, but you've got weapons and bodyguards, and he's laying there half unconscious. Like, just kill him. Like, what are you doing?
That showed true power. I liked that. That showed that she was so powerful, she didn't even need to kill this guy. He's got nothing left for her to gain. Why even waste the bullet on him? I thought that was cool. I thought that was just like, she's like, you bested me, but look, you're alone here in the desert, and I'm going to leave you, you know? And she was, she said, ain't we a pair? We both lost out on this one. And that was enough for her.
She sees him as an equal, right?
Yeah.
Or like
I really liked that. I thought that was great.
We both lost out today. Let's see what tomorrow brings. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so now did you guys, you mentioned Gyrocopter Captain. He actually has a name in this one, but whatever. Mel Gibson sees him, or Mad Max sees him, and kind of goes, you. But I don't get the impression, like they left, I feel like they left as friends at the end of Road Warrior. And then in this one, it's like they don't have any interest in each other. Like it felt like they were two new characters who just happened to be in the same role.
When he says you,
track for you guys?
He knows that's the, doesn't he say you because he knows that's the guy that stole his ride in the beginning? Like he follows him to Bartertown and finds him, and so he's like, oh, you're the guy that got me in this mess in the first place. That's what I thought that was from. Not like you're the guy from the last movie.
I would think that it'd be hard for him to know who the guy in because it's not the gyrocopter anymore. Now it's like a full-on
helicopter thing,
aircraft. It would be hard for him to like have seen him coming, I think. But I mean, it's possible. It's definitely possible. Unless he did recognize him as the gyro captain, recognize like anybody who can fly a vehicle around here, maybe guy. You are the same person. Maybe I'm connecting dots now that I didn't connect during the movie. Because I was just like, I don't understand why these guys don't recognize it. Why bring back the same actor to do a very similar role and not have them connect? And honestly, that's kind of the problem I have with all of these movies. It's just like it all feels disjointed, unless that's what they're going for. Again, we'll discuss that later on. Will, what did you think of this one?
It's hilarious. This is one of my least favorites.
Really?
Okay.
The whole franchise. Yeah. Like again, I love the world. I love the characters. Are there some bad characters in this? Yes. Like Iron Nub or whatever that guy's name is. He was terrible. as like the main baddie, really, right after Master Blaster. I was like, that's bad. But Master Blaster was like crazy and fun. I just felt like some of the comedic parts that you guys mentioned were forced in this one that didn't need to be there. Whereas like a lot of the other like zany, fun characters were more organic in the other movies. Just be like weird characters for weird characters' sake, not for like joke's sake. So that kind of like took me out of some of those things. I agree with the Tina Turner, like her character could have been really cool, but I don't know if Tina's the best actor, and they didn't give her a lot. And just the power dynamic in Bartertown was weird for me. Like Master Blaster has all the power, but Auntie is kind of the face of Bartertown. But everybody knows that Master Blaster is really the one running the place. It was just a strange dynamic that it didn't settle well for me throughout the movie. It was more like, we need this to happen for this plot to go through. So yeah, there was just like a lot of weird things. Here it is. They put too much plot into this movie for it to be just a fun action movie for me. I don't know why. It just seemed like there was too many nuances that only half worked. The kids, I agree with like he builds societies and little camps and raid groups very well, and each camp has their own unique flavor, and I love that. But the kids just like being like, we're out of here, we're gonna find this place with or without you. It just seemed forced to me, and they obviously had no idea what they were doing, and it brought up some weird shenanigans that was like, okay, that's pretty silly. So yeah, I love the world. I love some of the characters I really love, but the plot in this one actually took me out of it more than it made gains for me in this I don't know, installment.
What did you think of them just driving the train out of the pig farm? Like, that one was like, wait a minute, like, hey, we're gonna go back into Bartertown. It's our only chance. And then the kids just kind of run loose, and they're kind of comedic. They're kicking people over, and I'm like, these guys are out to kill you. This isn't supposed to be funny, and you're swinging around like Tarzan, and then they're just like, all right, let's just drive this train out of here. This happens to be a train, and it works, and we're just going to tear it off the rails and drive it out. There were so many of those instances where the plot needed to get from point A to point B, and it didn't make sense as to why it got from one point to the other, and you're just like, why? Like, why?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I agree a bit. I also think like Master Blaster probably had this rig ready to go at any given moment, as like if I need to get out of this town, I'm good to go. And that was
if
the
things
moment.
go south, I'm out.
What did they set that up properly? No, not in the least, right? So that makes it hard to connect those dots. But that's just how I played it off in my mind. Did I love it? No. But did it lead to a fun and exciting car mashup of vehicles? Yeah. So, I mean, you forgive it to a certain degree, right? I also don't feel that it's Feral Kid. I do feel that it is what's his name's kid. Like, they look quite similar. They act very similar. I think it's actually his
genetic son, Jedediah and Jedediah Jr.
Yeah, I think so, because even and again, it's hard to like connect the movies because they're kind of just disjointed and the whole legend of storytelling thing. But he was kind of hooking up or looking at one of the townspeople in the second one, and they were kind of an item in the end, and he was kind of going off
trying to convince her to leave.
Yeah,
and she's like, no, I can't.
He was kind of becoming one of the forefront leaders of that group by the end of the movie. So I figure that him and his kid were kind of all that was left of that group. And they're living their best life. But yeah, the interactions between him and Max were like so off that it's so just disjointed from the second one that it was weird. If you'd watch this by itself, I think it would be more okay than watching the other movies. So it's weird that way. And I think a lot of Mad Maxes are like that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. One of the things I mentioned about this movie is like it does. Again, I've said it before. Like the first one has this very ominous tone to it, and this one has a very comedic tone to it. And I'm not sure that that's the right tone for this franchise or this movie. But I really just did have fun with
Mhm.
this one. So like it did kind of work. Now it would have been interesting to have this same movie with the ominous tones to it. So you walk into Border Town and you're just like, someone's gonna get shanked at any second here. And instead they kind of went the opposite way and kind of like relieved a lot of that tension.
Mhm.
So I couldn't say if that was the right call or not because I enjoyed it, but it could have been a very different and probably better movie without it.
Right. Yeah. I think they're like leaning into certain directions and kind of feeling what works and what doesn't work throughout these movies, right? Like it is what it
Yeah.
is. That's how movies kind of go with stories. Should we rate
All right,
this bad
so
boy?
I was just gonna say, Brian, do you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, this one jumped up. We went 57, 61. This one jumped up to a 79 for me. It improved across the board in
Wow.
every category, a little or a lot. Definitely needs more polish. Definitely disjointed. We all agree on that. Whether you watch it as a standalone or you watch it as a part of the series, there's connections to be made or lost from that. So, so it definitely went up. So 79 for me.
Now I'm going to go next because I'm going to agree with you on that. Every category of this went up for me. Everything about this movie was just more what I was expecting, more what I was looking for. Maybe the tone was a little bit off and it still wasn't great, but it was a lot closer to where I wanted it to be. So this one jumped up to a 72 for me. Now, Will, you say this is your lowest score. So I'm
That's right.
super curious. Where are we going on this
I'm
one?
plummeting this bad boy score. This was my least favorite of all of the Mad Max, including Furiosa.
You're just going to keep rubbing that in,
Yeah,
huh?
absolutely. Throughout, I did watch it. I did, and I actually enjoyed it. But anyway, we'll get to that. This one I scored a 55.
Oof.
I just don't feel it's like it's kind of like the typical 80s like cheese ball movies that just don't age well for me. So like rewatching this compared to rewatching other Mad Max, I don't feel it holds up quite as well. Um, I don't feel like the writing held up as well because maybe they tried to put too much plot in and it didn't all fall into place for me. So yeah, this one dropped quite a bit.
Nope, that's totally fair. So if we take those three scores, it does still come out as the highest of the franchise so far. I don't know if we announced the second one. So the first movie, Mad Max, got a 60 from us total. Road Warrior got 64, and then Beyond Thunderdome is coming in with a 69.
Don't worry, it's all unimportant when Fury Road hits the stage here.
I mean, this is all pretty unimportant regardless, but yes. All right. Will, you said again, this is one of your favorite movies, or this is one of the movies that make you tick. Do you want to take us down the road for Fury Road?
Yeah, I think Fury Road is kind of gonna be George Miller's as close to perfect movie as he's ever gonna make. I think this is just like everything hits where world creation, story, character, everything just kind of clicks into place in this movie. And you guys have been talking about bad scoring throughout Mad Max. This one is epic. Everything I can't say much bad things about this movie aside from like, and maybe not a lot of people know this. There was a comic book, Mad Max Fury Road, released like 4 issues or so, 3 or 4 months prior to this movie being released. And there's story elements in that kind of integrate into this movie. Do you need to know those things? I don't think so. But does it kind of enrich the story a little bit? Yes. And that's kind of the
It
biggest
would have
fault.
helped for sure.
I don't know if I mean, there's only like one major thing that kind of stuck out as a sore thumb for me from that. But aside from that, like, I just think that as far as action movies, pure adrenaline, this is like top notch for me. Like, there's not a lot of pure action movies that can hold a candle to this movie. And I was hopeful that this movie in 2015 would force Hollywood to make better choices in their action movies moving forward, but it's just cheaper to use CGI and garbage. And so nothing came of it. And I am a sad, sad man because of that.
Well, let's be honest. There's some pretty nasty CGI in this movie too, so it's not walking away clean.
I mean,
I think
I've
it was
seen
used
worse.
well, though. It was
Have
used
you
well.
have you seen The Hobbit?
Fair.
But yes, I believe it was used when it was necessary. Was it the highest quality CGI? No. Did it get the job done and amplified for the most part? Yes, I think so.
For the most part, yes, I would agree. The car crash at the very end, where like the steering wheel comes flying at the screen, it just feels like this was made for 3D, and it wasn't even made that well for 3D. Like, okay,
That scene,
like
that specific
most of the
scene
movie's good.
bothered me. How the guitar comes at you, and then the steering wheel. I was like, you didn't need to do that.
That's entirely just like, whoa.
Yeah, for sure.
Look what we can do.
I kind of have to I have to remove that, because I know in my heart of hearts that the Hollywood producers are like, you have to have this in your movie because we have to make it 3D because 3D is the biggest thing. And so George is like, okay, well, we'll put it in. I don't think George Miller would have chose to do that.
Yeah, it stood apart from the film. It didn't
100%.
feel right.
It really
didn't
stood
fit,
out.
you know?
So I forgive some of that because of I know how the industry works. But you're right. It's terrible. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. I'm just an overarching. I can go into greater detail, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about this movie so I can correct you on it.
Dan, let's go.
That's
I want to hear Dan next.
All right. So, as I mentioned, I saw this one in 2015 because my wife and I try and watch all the Oscar-nominated movies. So I was watching this one for the very first time, my very first Mad Max movie, and I'm just sitting there, and I'll admit I was harshly critical the first time I was watching this. I'm like, why the crap is this up for a Best Oscar nomination? Like, granted, there's some really artsy movies that I'm also like, this is terrible. I don't know why I'm watching this, but I was watching this one. I'm just like, it's fine. It's fine. So I wanted to come back to this one. I bought the DVD or the Blu-ray of this one like 6 months ago before we decided to do this, because I wanted to go back and rewatch it without that preconception in it, and just be like, everybody talks so highly about this movie. I have to give it another try. And then when we decided we were doing this, I was like, oh, perfect. I'll watch them in order. Maybe it'll make more sense. It didn't make any more sense. There's nothing in the other movies that jumped out to be like, oh, cool, this connects now. In fact, there were things that confused me more, because I think the first time I watched this and he's having these flashbacks to a little girl, my brain was just like, clearly that was his daughter or something from a previous movie. I haven't seen the previous movies. That doesn't make sense to me. And then I watched the previous movies and I'm like, that's not in any of those. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He had a little boy and the little boy was like 3 months old. It wasn't a little girl. It wasn't 7 years old. It wasn't talking to him. What is going on? So I had to look that up afterwards. So I didn't know about the comic book until after I finished the movie. And it was like, okay, I guess that would make more sense. You're right. It doesn't necessarily a plot that goes somewhere, but it comes up a lot in the movie. And it affects his ability to do things in the movie. And you're just like,
it saves his
I really
life.
want this to get explained. And it never gets explained in the movie whatsoever. There's no resolution to it. There's no like, oh, this happened, or he doesn't get over it. It's just there. Why not? This movie is an epic car chase for the entirety of the movie. It is literally just, we're going to go from point A to point B, and then what the hell, let's turn around and go back to point A again. And I didn't dislike it nearly as much the second time as I did the first time. The first time it kind of bothered me, like, what are we doing? What is the point of this? And this time around, you're just like, oh, we're just having fun. That's all we're doing. We're just going to have a fun action ride. Let's just go for it. I think Charlize Theron was amazing. I think Tom Hardy was a way better actor. Again, like Brian was saying, doing nothing than Mel Gibson was trying to do everything. He didn't have the mask on for nearly as much of the movie that I thought he did. Like the first time I saw this, I really thought he had the mask on for like 95%, and he cuts it off pretty quick. And you're just like, oh, all right, fair enough. There's still not really any plot to this. Mad Max still has no real desires or wants, literally, other than just he wants his car and he wants gas. That's really all he wants in this entire franchise.
Like, need.
He's lost everything. What else does he need? He's lost everything.
Give me the juice. Let me go.
Yeah. These movies, like every single one of them, I think starts off with him in a car accident, losing his vehicle, and then it's just like, all right, I guess I got to get it back now.
You took our ride. Let's go.
Yeah. No, I watched this one right after watching Thunderdome. The difference in quality. Now, granted, it's 85 to 2015. There's like a 30-year difference there. Holy whatever. This movie looked so much better Like, this movie looks legitimately good. I was watching it on Blu-ray, and I was actually like, I kind of want to stop, go find a 4K, and just keep going because this looks
Yeah.
really, really good. Excuse me. That said, there were some CGI issues that bothered me, and there were some like camera tricks that he was pulling where he just like speed up the frames just like a little bit. Like every now and then it'd be like, oh, now we're at 1.5 speed. I'm like, don't do that. That's unnecessary. You don't need to do that. That's fine. But overall, I enjoyed this, but I still didn't like walk away with this with like a deep love for this movie. It was fun. It was probably it's the best made one by far. I just think I kind of like the world of Bartertown a little bit more than just the open road of Fury Road. Now, the one thing I really did like about this movie is it's the first one where they finally don't take bikes seriously. Like in every movie, bikers come up next to cars and they're like, ah, and they die to the biker. And in this one, they're just like, swerve, and the biker dies. They're like, yes, thank you.
Snapping them out of the air with single fire rifles too. That was a little. I was like, wow, you're a really good shot.
Right? It was just, oh, I was so happy when he just swerved and took a bike out. I was like, thank you. You're figuring it out. There's the second one, I think it is, a biker comes up next to him, breaks his windshield, and he completely loses control of his vehicle and like spins off and rolls. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, so I don't know. I really did like that. You know me, Brian. I really like dialogue. There is no dialogue in this movie.
Although,
like, this is entirely show not tell.
Of the girls in the back of the car when they're talking and screaming and ranting or whatever, it's hard to hear them because there's usually a lot of commotion going on. But they have, much like I enjoyed from the kids in the last one, they have their own dialect, their own way of speaking. And it's that world building, that tribe building that they do, and it keeps improving throughout each movie. And in this one, I think, and I am seeing Furiosa, but in this one, I feel like they reached the pinnacle with that, with Bullet Town and with the Gas Town and with the Citadel. So, and you see those tribes and you hear the girls talking and the family and everything. Yeah.
George Miller does a really good job in these movies with building a world by just giving you characters, and you kind of figure out the world through the characters as opposed to literally showing you the world. Now, 2 of the movies do start with a narrator just to kind of give you a brief idea of what's going on. But beyond that, it's a lot of just like, here are the people that survive in this world. Figure out what the world is based off of those people. And I do really like that. And you're right, the wives, I think they're called, or the whatever in the back seats, do add to that significantly. I found myself caring more for oh god, this is why you have IMDb open. The guy who plays Beast. Yes, Nux. More so than almost anybody else in this movie. Like Mad Max, I don't have anything to really grab onto there. Furiosa, she does a great job as an actress. Don't have a whole lot going on there. Nux is the biggest one that goes through like a character arc. Like you get where he starts from, you get where he's going to, you get where the conclusion of the character, unfortunately. I really liked him. What is his name? Holt?
Nicholas Holt.
Brian Holt.
Nicholas Holt
does a really, really good job in this one and delivers one of the only like memorable lines in this with a witness me. Like
the war boys,
that could be a quote, right? But like the rest of the movie,
a lot of memorable lines in it, all honestly. But yeah, you're right. He has some good stuff.
What do you think, Brian?
Okay. As you guys were reminding me things about this, and keep in mind, I watched this last night again for probably the 4th time. Much like Will, I love this movie. I think it's amazing. I think it's close to a masterpiece. The music was great. They've got a guitar that shoots flames, and they ramped it up during all the chase scenes. It was right there. It was amazing. The sound effects, the engine noises, the nitrous boosts, all of it just on point. Everything nice and crisp. Did a fantastic job there. The cinematography was nearly perfect. Nearly perfect. And the 2 things that bothered me was, one, the crash scene with the guitar and the steering wheel just took me out of the film. It made me roll my eyes. Much like you, Will, I felt like somebody forced them to put that in there because it just did not fit right at all.
Luckily, it was at the end.
Yeah, and then the speed ramping in some of the chase scenes and everything. You're right; they didn't need that. I felt like they were just trying to make things look like they were going faster. Like maybe they had to film it slower because they used a lot of practical effects instead of special effects, and so I felt like it was kind of necessary. But I wish they could have done without it. But otherwise, almost a perfect score when it comes to cinematography. The wide-angle shots, the scenes where you're seeing like a biker and he's giving like a hand signal and he's like talking, and in the background you can see like the three tribes merging after the war rig through the canyon, all this crazy stuff. The shots as people were getting run over by vehicles, just I mean it made you feel like you were going to be crushed. Like it was amazing. It was amazing. The acting, this is a tough one for me because okay, Max, Tom Hardy is probably hands down my favorite actor of all. And he had like, you could fit all of his dialogue on one page, right? Like he had so few lines in this movie, but he did a lot with it. He did an amazing job with it. I felt for the first time in the franchise, he's mad, you know? Finally, we have a Mad Max. I felt like he had lost it, like he was on the edge, especially the first sequence when they capture him and he's trying to escape out of the Citadel. You just know he's losing it. He's lost it, in fact, and he's just trying to keep a grip on reality. He's definitely Mad Max in this. Furiosa, I thought, was amazing in this film. When she comes to the conclusion of what has happened to her homeland and all of her efforts for nothing, and she goes out there and she's screaming, I felt that. That was great. I thought it was a really good scene. Then, of course, the dialogue and how they speak, the world building with the tribes, the family, right? What's his name by Hugh, Immortal Joe? His character and the way he speaks and mediocre and just all this stuff that you don't need an explanation, but you've never heard anything like it before, but you understand it. It was amazing. The way the girls talk in the back of the car also adds to the cinematography. When Max walks around the corner and sees those beautiful women in white clothing washing themselves off with an abundance of water, that was a slap in the face as the viewer, and you felt him just go, what is going on here? So,
oh, I died. Oh, okay.
Yes, I died. All right. Yeah. Enjoyment factor through the roof. Just from start to finish, love every second, every environment, every character, every part of this movie. Absolutely enjoyed it. The only thing I had problem with was probably the plot was a little bit lacking in that some things just didn't quite add up or maybe needed explanation. You guys are talking to me about this comic book that I had no idea about. Maybe explains the little girl and why he, had a flash from her and it saves his life, which has no explanation whatsoever where that came from, and they never give an explanation. I needed more there. I could have used a little bit more when it comes to some of the characters. Like I guess I just wanted more. Like I wanted like an extended cut, I guess is what I needed, just a little bit more, so I know I just want more from some of the characters. I wanted more scenes with some of the characters, especially the girls, not because they were hot, but because I think those characters could have added some value, and they all seem to me to have like a vibrant backstory that I just don't get to know about. So the little girl that he has flashes of, I didn't know anything about, and that bothered me. And the other thing that bothered me was they get to the end of the world and they're like, we can ride 160 days into the salt flats, or we could just turn around and go back to the Citadel. Like out of nowhere, they come up with this idea. Let's just turn around and drive back. And it didn't seem like a victory at all. It seemed like a terrible idea. And they go back there, and one of the Joes, in the little short pudgy guy in the chair, he's like watching the gates and he's like, yeah, okay, let him in. Sure. And I was like, why? Like, why didn't you, like, you could have been king, you little pudgy guy. You could have been king of this place if you just didn't let him up. Like, Why did that
Now,
work?
you guys have seen this more often.
There was so much.
You guys have seen this more than I have. Did he let them in? I was under the impression he was kind of like, I'm
He
screwed.
didn't-
Like I figured he's going to get tossed off a
He
ledge very
didn't
soon.
say no. He didn't step up, and he just kind of stood there and went like, and then the little kids are like, yeah, let's let him up, and they push the lever, and up they go. And it was like, that's what it came down to, was like indecision, and you get the victory, and then the other towns are gonna come back. Like, what? They're just gonna let you take it? I don't know. It just I needed more for that. I needed more explanation on that. That plot didn't seem panned out very well. I was wondering where they were going to go when they found out that everything was gone, and they just decide, hey, let's just do a Yui. And I was like, okay, made for a great drive home, but just weird. So
I think when it comes to it, whoever holds the water is going to hold the power.
I guess
right?
so,
if they're the
yeah.
ones that control the water. Like, what choice do the other towns have? And the other towns lost their leaders. Like the diabetic guy
That's
from
true,
Oil
yeah.
Town or
With
whatever
the
it was,
gout.
like he's dead.
with the world's
I don't know about the
worst
bullet
case
guy.
of
I'm pretty
gout,
sure
yeah,
he's dead.
He was dead.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
nasty.
Yeah, both
So-
brothers died. All three died. Let's be honest. I feel like I didn't mind the let's turn around. That's like the twist that they try to like put into these movies now. It's like all this work to get to her home was for naught.
Yeah.
And I think it was Max who brought up the idea of like, well, there is a place that we know has, you know, everything we need. And it's the Citadel.
And the only thing they gained, because she found out her hometown was gone, all of those women from her hometown died trying to get back to the Citadel. The only thing they gained was a bag of seeds. When you, I mean,
and a couple of family members.
Yeah.
Well, and the lack of a Morton Joe. I
they
think
killed
that's
the
the big
brothers.
thing.
They
They
killed
lost
the trio,
the hierarchy.
right? And they come back with a bag of seeds. And so a huge victory, but it was like, it like just kind of happened. And I guess that's kind of how these Mad Max movies work. They just kind of happen. And Max just goes with the flow, makes morally good decisions, even though he's losing his mind. And
and then fades into
and
the
then fades
into the background,
distance.
right?
Yeah, just walks off into the sunset kind of thing.
Him fading into the crowd and just having that like see you later moment. I don't know why that bothered me a lot. I'm just like, oh, so there's no beginning or middle to your plot. We're just watching you for a day. Like, okay, fair enough. That's what I should get from these movies. I should know it by now. It's the fourth one.
Yeah.
But it's just like, out of curiosity, the off topic. Well, not off topic, but Will, is Chris Hemsworth playing Mad Max in the Furiosa movie?
No, he's Immortal Joe.
No,
okay,
he's
good.
He's playing he's playing the Dementor.
Oh.
He's laying siege to the Citadel, actually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I thought he was Mad Max. I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna square that circle, but okay.
I don't want to spoil
We'll get into
anything,
that later. I just wanted to know that.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to clear up a couple of things and maybe bring some things, ideas to the table, whatever.
Okay.
So Glory the Child is the vision, just for Brian's sake, who doesn't know the comic book even exists.
I knew it existed. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. So for me, I think going into this movie, not seeing other Mad Maxes makes more sense, like Dan did, because you're like, oh, this child's from his past, don't know who it is, but you know he's haunted by it and he's insane. That makes more sense than Brian, who's seen all the Mad Max and is like, who the hell is this character?
I just assumed it was kind of like a reboot, and they were just going to go with he had an older daughter. They got rolled over.
Yeah, and that's what I did as well when I first watched it in theaters. But then I found out, they released a comic book prior to the movie called Mad Max Road Warrior, and in that he goes back to Thunderdome. He fights. He meets up with this woman and her daughter, and he saves her. She saves him. And at the end, spoiler alert, they get run over by a biker gang. And so he feels responsible for their death as well. And so that's the child now who's also haunting him.
Okay.
And so that kind of puts it more in perspective. But the comic book also goes over, there's like a issue for Immortal Joe and Nux. There's an issue on Max. Then there's an issue on Furiosa. So it's like interesting that there's a whole bunch of story happening before this movie. But I think like Nux didn't need anything, and I don't think Joe needed anything. But the Max thing with Glory the Child is kind of the weird outlying thing that was like, that would have been nice to have. And apparently when they were like screen testing, it didn't go over well. The child was just saying, "Hey, mister," "Hey, this or that." And so I think they changed one of the lines where the child actually says, "Hey, pa," as in father,
Yeah, which was just confusing.
which isn't, well, it isn't if you haven't seen the other Mad Maxes, right? I think that
Sure.
that solidifies it more in its own world. And I think that leads more into like a legendary tale instead of like connecting storylines here. But yeah, that was kind of the major plot point that kind of stood out for me when I watched the movie. And again, I let it go because she did say "pa," and it's just whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe they reimagined it as a girl instead of his son dying or whatever, right?
Yeah. I have to agree with you. I don't care enough about Immortan Joe or Nux to need more from their story. I feel like you got everything you needed for them in this movie. Not that I didn't like their characters, just that I don't need a backstory for Immortan Joe. He's a powerful warlord. He's in charge. He's greedy.
You know his
good enough.
Yeah,
like you get everything you need from him in kind of the first like 2 scenes. Nux, same kind of thing. Like he's sick with something. He wants to be, remembered. He wants to go to Valhalla. Like clearly this is part of their religion or part of their cult or whatever you want to call it. And that's what his goal is. Like you kind of get everything you need about him. And then you got Mad Max. And you're just like, oh, this is the main character. I should know about him. And you're just kind of thrown into this. Now, I agree with you. When this is the only one I've seen, I just went, oh, it's his daughter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And now you actually get the backstory. You're like, I don't know what's going on. I was more confused. So
exactly. Does that take away from the overall movie? I don't think so, because again, I see it as the action movie, and I do want to point out, like, they did do the same camera thing in some of the other Mad Maxes where they sped it up, and I didn't.
They did that heavy in the first one. They did it heavily in the first one.
And I agree. I think the reason is so they could do stunts and things at survivable speed.
That makes sense.
But I also didn't hate it in this movie because I feel like they chose to do it in parts where like it's high adrenaline, so things are like almost like disorienting anyway. Yep. So it didn't bother me or take me out as much as maybe it did for a lot of people. And that's saying a lot because I hate shaky cam action sequences more than anybody. But for some reason that I felt like it was more of a stylized choice in this movie than not.
Circling back around to Nux, I felt like Nux kind of flipped like a switch. And I needed a little bit more of a transition in his progression from being a war boy to being on Team Max. And it was like, I don't know, like he took a nap and woke up next to the redhead and he's like, yeah, I'm here now. And that was it. And I know.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Did you see the redhead? Let's be honest. Did you see the redhead?
If you woke up, there you go. So there you go.
But
not so bad.
I loved his character. I loved his acting. His mates was fantastic. Great. I just felt that could have used a touch more, but it wasn't too bad. I get where they were going. And he did have those sequences like where he makes eye contact with Immortan Joe and you can see his just despair that he failed, and it just wrecks him. And it was really good acting on that part. So it was all right.
I think that's more of it for me is it was a lot of the acceptance that he instantly got with this new group of people where he's like, oh, I'm an equal. Whereas the entire time with the War Boys, I get the impression he was a weakling. Yeah. He was sick. He was gamely. He was found wanting. He always had to prove himself. And he finally found a tribe where he's like, oh, I'm just me and just me is enough. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very powerful thing. And I think that could turn you pretty quickly, especially coming from a group of people who look like that. Just that kind of level of acceptance. I agree with you. It was quick, but for the movie we had, I didn't hit it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing is like, and Dan, you mentioned like you love scripts with great dialogue, and I can appreciate that. I fully agree with that, but I can also appreciate the polar opposite, where I feel like George Miller told an amazing story with very little dialogue. It was all in the action and the world and the characers that I really didn't feel like it was missing dialogue when I was watching it.
And I too liked dialogue. I didn't feel like it was missing anything either. I thought it was so much with so little.
The one thing I'll punch back on that is the scene where he comes around the car and the women are cleaning themselves, and he's kind of having that first one-off with Furiosa. That was the one scene where I'm like, dude, just say fucking words and this will be over in a second. Like,
Right.
there's no reason for you guys to be at polar opposites or have guns to each other's necks here. Like, just like, I can't remember exactly where we're at in the movie at that point, but I feel like at that point he could have just been like, hey, I hate that guy too. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Let's get in this rug and get out of here. Like, we can make this happen. And instead it was like gunpoint and shooting at people, and it's like, this doesn't
I kind of felt like that was actually appropriate. I feel like he had been solo for so long, he had lost words. Like, he just didn't even have language anymore. He was so used to just being insane by himself. And being chased around by the war boys in the Citadel, he didn't really have anything to say other than and then the first time when he needs to speak to someone, he walks around the corner to see those beauties. I would be at a loss for words too. I felt it was appropriate. Like, and so he was just with the gun. He's like, get this chain, you know, and or not even saying it, but it's just, you know, holding the chain up. Like, I got it. I can see your.
I get that they don't trust each other, and I get the world that we're in. They can't trust each other. I get that, but it feels like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy is right there. Like,
well, let's move
to the very end of the movie until he could even say his name to her. You know, like, it was that hard for him to communicate with another person. He was that far off the deep end. He was that mad. And finally, we have a Mad Max. And Furiosa and this adventure brought him back and grounded him a little bit.
I must also say, not to diss your comment, Dan, I agree. Like, a simple dialogue could have resolved that situation. But it made for a really cool fight scene with, like, knocked out Nux chained to him, fighting Furiosa. Like, it was a really cool dynamic fight scene because he wasn't talking.
Yeah, no, you're right, and you're right. For the world, it makes sense. Just for me personally, I'm like,
for sure, there's easier ways to get around this.
Right.
Yeah. All right, should we get to rating this bad boy?
Absolutely. Will, you're gonna come out, actually, you know what, you're gonna come out probably the highest on this one. I'm gonna go first.
All right.
This one stepped up significantly in pretty much every category for me. The cinematography, as Brian already mentioned, was damn near perfect for me. Just an absolutely stunning movie. It is a ridiculous spectacle of a film. The music was a spectacle, but I still just didn't like it very much. Like, it's cool that he has the guitar and like the drums going and whatnot. Like, all that's cool. But for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what that song sounds like right now, other than metal. You know what I mean? Like, I want for me to give it a really great score. Like, I can not even necessarily like the Indiana Jones, the really, really big movies, but even some like smaller movies. Like, I can tell you what some like Kevin Smith movies sound like. You know what I mean? And I walk out of this movie and I'm like, there was music. That's all I got.
Right. But can I just ask you though, like,
yeah, go for it.
Not every movie to me that has like a overarching theme song like Indiana or Jurassic Park, that doesn't always work for every movie, right? Like, there's times when music should add to the tension or add to the excitement, but it doesn't have to be like a written piece that's coming up throughout the movie kind of thing, or throughout the franchise. You know what I mean?
No, I get that.
Not and
like, it doesn't have to be Star Wars where every time you see an Imperial droid, you get that Imperial music. Yeah, I get that. It does. I'm not saying it has to be that specifically, but I feel like a franchise that now has 5 movies deep, it probably wouldn't be the worst idea if there was like even a remote cohesion between them. Like, okay, we see the hero, we see Mad Max. Let's get that, like, even a little guitar riff where you're just like, it's like, oh, okay, that's our hero.
I didn't need it. Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, and 3. You know, those are Guardians of the Galaxy soundtracks, but they're completely different soundtracks each time.
But they have cohesion. They're all set in roughly the same time frames. It makes
Jurassic
sense.
Park is the same damn song until my ears bleed. Star Wars has Star Warsy sound to it. They change it up when they go to like Rogue One. It's Star Wars music, but it's different, right? and then there are other movies that they just have good scoring, good music, good sound effects overall, and it has nothing to do with anybody. It doesn't have to be labeled onto that. And I thought this was one of them. I didn't need a theme with it, and so I was totally okay with it. And I just felt like you heard music that was a part of the tribe that you were looking at or dealing with at the time, you know, and in Morton Joe's, the Joes had that metal blaring every time. You had more drum beats when you went over to the Bullet Farm people. I don't remember what the fuel people really had a sound, but there was more some whimsical stuff when you were with either of the female camps. And I felt like they each had their own individual kind of sound to them, and I thought it worked. I thought it was fine.
That's right. You picked up on that way more than I did, apparently, because it all just blended together and was just forgettable. And I'm not saying it was bad. Like, my score for it isn't like,
Yeah.
oh, it's atrocious. It's just it didn't stand out. Like,
Yeah,
I've
for me,
just
I
seen
just
all
wanted
four
to-
movies, and I couldn't for the life of me tell you. Like, if you played it right now as like a trivia game, I couldn't tell you what song came from which movie or if it came from these movies at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess my only point, and again, you of course are entitled to your own
Sure.
opinion and everything, but for me, it's like you got the Jurassic Parks of the world that like make a soundtrack for that franchise. But then there's also movies that are like you make the soundscape to suit the movie. It doesn't have to stand out in any way as like this big overarching thing. It just has to. For me, if I'm not noticing the music standing out, that's sometimes better because it's
Fair.
actually like leading into the action and allowing you to just like intake the whole thing without things like weirdly standing out.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. In the earlier ones, like Mad Max 1 for sure, it stood out in a bad way.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, I felt like it blended into the world of what it was and what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
So for me, it was better, but I completely understand. And you're saying it's better too, but I just wanted to clarify.
To be clear, there's also situations where like certain movies can have no music, and I would give it almost a perfect score. Where you're like, nope, I didn't need that at all. Like Quiet Place, if they put music in that, would be
that'd
awful.
be terrible. That'd be real bad.
Right? So like they made the exact right choice by not having anything. So it's not like, oh, I absolutely require a theme to give a good score. It just, I don't know. Anyways, the music was fine. The cinematography, some of the CG was bad, but other than that, it was basically perfect. The acting I thought was a huge step up from literally everybody. The plot razor thin, but it works for what the movie's supposed to be. And then the enjoyment level, I really did enjoy this one. But at the end of the day, this is not one that I'm likely to go back to a lot. It was fun for what it is. It's a great action movie. I'm giving it a 76. So it is the highest of my scores, but it's not a perfect movie for me. It's not what I'm going to watch on a Friday night.
Just above average.
I'd say 75 it's a B. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd be amazed with that in high school.
Okay, well, for different folks, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, fair.
What do you think, Will?
Okay.
No, let's go. Brian.
Yeah,
right.
this movie's a winner in my book. This makes the top 100, top 50, maybe it brushes up against the top 20. It's a fantastic film. It's a great piece. It sets a bar that other movies need to try and achieve. It does things differently and amazingly, and I love when people can do something new and different, like very little dialogue, showing an amazing range of characters, and those characters can show an amazing range of emotion and feeling. This movie's amazing. The plot was probably the weakest point for me, and this was the better plot of all the movies in the franchise. It wasn't even a terrible plot. It just had a few holes that needed more. Like I said, I feel like a director's cut could have brought this movie up for me several points in so many different ways. And I guess having that comic book probably would have been a lot of that too. Music, real high score, cinematography, almost perfect. Acting was a stellar job. Plot, that was the weak point, but still a high score, especially compared to the rest of them. And then the fun factor, the enjoyment. Just really love this movie. For me, this was a 93 out of 100. And I'm pretty critical of rating stuff. I don't think I'll ever rate a movie a perfect 100. So for this to make it into the 90s says a lot for the way I score movies. And this movie was just phenomenal. I just think it was a really amazing movie.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat to Brian. In 2015, this released. It was a breath of fresh air as far as action movies go for me. And I put a lot of like personal into a lot of movies, and I am very critical. I can be very critical of movies. This is after like all the Bourne Supremacy movies with the shaky cam, and shaky cam action took over Hollywood, and I absolutely despise it. And this came along with practical effects, great stunt work, a simple but a driving story, pun intended. And like Brian said, the use of minimal dialogue with maximum effect because of this fun and twisted world that we're living in. I thought it was just great. And overall, 94 out of 100. So yeah, Brian and I are rating the same mark there.
Yeah. All right. High five, buddy.
93.
High five.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would love, can I? Oh, there's a few things I want to talk about.
That does bring the average up pretty hard for this franchise.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
and I think it's worth it. I think this is by far, I think this is one of the best action movies made in the last 30 years. Like, it is so good. It is so good for me. But I would love to know, like, Dan, are action movies a go-to for you? And if so, irrelevant, can you name one of your top action movies just out of the just putting you on the spot?
Yeah, no worries. I don't know that action directly would be super high, but like when you get action mixed with something else, usually sci-fi, then it would jump higher. Big ones for me is, I mean, straight action, probably Die Hard would be pretty high up on that list.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
But like the first thing that comes to mind is like Edge of Tomorrow, which is admittedly much more sci-fi action.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just wondering to like gauge it, just because. Yeah, Brian and I feel like I see eye to eye more on this one specifically, but like just to see where you're at with action in general, just to like know you better. That's all.
Yeah, no worries. A lot of this is going to be just getting to know each other and whatnot, and it works better, honestly, if we don't have the exact same opinion on everything.
Okay, so
the score is going to be a little interesting, but so be it.
I want you to tally the score, and I'm going to talk about Furiosa, a Mad Max saga.
Go for it.
I rated this movie a 75.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I feel like it's still the great same world that was created in Fury Road. You get to see this great character that was created and kind of what they went through. The problem with this movie is, one, we already know what's happening. They talk about it in the Fury Road. So I'm like, why are you making this movie when we already know the storyline? So that was really weird to me. And then the other biggest thing is, you thought this had bad CGI. Furiosa just threw away the amazing practical. There's still some great stuff, but there's way more CGI, and it stands out way more, and it's not utilized when necessary, like a Jurassic Park or a Fury Road. It's this is cheaper, let's just do this. It's safer, let's just do this. So that was rough. But Brian was saying, like, hey, I would love to know more about some of these characters. Go watch Furiosa. You will get to see more of some of those characters.
Well, you said that, I thought that Chris Hemsworth played an Immortan Joe, a young version of him. I thought that's what that was about. And I was like, great. It's like a bunch of characters I already know what happens to. Why do I care? But you're telling me this is a little bit different story here. Now I'm even more intrigued. I'm probably going to wait for a price drop or to come out on a streaming service,
100%.
because $25 to rent and $29 to buy is just, it's kind of disgusting. I do want to know more. I want to see Furiosa. I just think the price point was ridiculous on that. And then I was kind of rushed today. So I was like, I'm not gonna wreck myself staying up late last night or miss out, make my mom sleep on the floor because she needs a mattress, and I'm gonna watch Furiosa instead.
Exactly.
So I am intrigued a little bit more now. And I got a question for you, Will, though. If it was between we can make this movie if we use CGI because it'll come in under budget, or we can not make this movie at all. Which would you have preferred? I mean, are you offended that they backtracked on these
I mean,
amazing on the
75 is not a bad
amazingness?
score.
Yeah, 70.
No. Yeah, I think it's again, as a pure action movie, taking away we've already know the story, we know what's happening. It's still a fun popcorn movie. Action is high. There's
Yeah.
lots of fun action. And I don't know if you know this, originally it was supposed to be the original actress. But George Miller decided against it eventually because he didn't like the de-aging CGI. So
Okay.
he was like, I would love to do it with
Charlize Theron.
Charlize Theron, but I don't. And he saw other de-aging CGI movies. He's like, I just don't think it will work.
Good call.
Yeah, that's a good call.
enough.
I hate the de-aging CGI if it's not necessary. It creeps me out when I see that in movies.
And so I do find that what's her name, Anya, did a great job. Taylor-Joy did a great job of Furiosa. I think she brought a lot of strength that the character has, and things like that. And there was a younger actress as well that played the young Furiosa, which was fine. So like, there's a lot of choices I think that were made to make this movie good, and I think it was a good movie. I don't want to really talk about the haters of the world that just hate female leads and strong female characters. I think it's destroying potentially good movie options. And like their argument for it is like lost on me, especially if you watched the movie, because Furiosa doesn't use brute strength. She uses guns and tactics to outsmart people. So it's like it's a terrible argument. So I hate that the world is coming to this. So yeah, overall, it's an enjoyable movie. You do get more story for a few of the characters, which is nice. But overall, I just don't feel like it was I'd rather they just did a whole new story, because you're going to spend the money anyway. You might as well make a whole new story than something we already know is going to happen and how it's going to end. You know, prequels always kind of give me that vibe, though. So.
Yeah, you already know the end of the story, so why are
we already have an origin
this one ends
story
exactly where Fury Road. It ends exactly where Fury Road picks up.
Okay.
To the point where, and I hated this part, at the end credits, they show shots of Fury Road, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you showing the superior movie after you showed this? You're just making it look worse.
Yeah. Yeah, we watched the trailer for this one, Brian and I did a little while ago, and even from the trailer, you're just like, this just doesn't look as good as I remember Fury Road looking.
Yeah.
Like it looks like they were using the volume or green screens or something. You're just like, not really hitting the mark.
In Fury Road, when they show the storm and they're driving into that immense storm, especially when they're driving into it, and you just see the cloud of smoke and a little bit of lightning in it, and they're driving into it, you're like, wow, the vastness, the immensity of it all. They get inside, and you got like these electrical dust tornadoes with firestorms all in the mix, and it's a little over the top. But that hot rod car with one flat tire, he's squealing around behind him. It was fun, man. That was fun. And I thought, there's no other way you make that scene without CGI. That scene doesn't exist without CGI. Sure. So that's when it's okay. That's when they use that to just do something that is larger than life that you can't possibly make in any other way.
And somewhat of a plot point to help them distance themselves from
They needed a smoke screen, right? As many gadgets as they had on that, they didn't have like, caltraps or anything that they could drop off the back of that tank, which I thought was a choice. But they had a gas pedal that locks itself down so you can instantly use cruise control in the most weird way I've ever seen. Whatever. It was cool, man. Yeah. It was cool. What was that? The foot pedal was made out of like the shoe size thing that they used to have at like Walmart, That was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what we're looking at here is we gave our scores originally. We averaged them all out. So for Mad Max, we gave a score of 60. Now that's combined all three of us. For Road Warrior, 64. Beyond Thunderdome 69, and then it jumps significantly for Fury Road, jumping all the way up to 88, which brings this average up to a pretty lukewarm 70 for the franchise as a whole. Now, when you were watching these movies, did that make sense to you? Do you feel like that's a little higher than it should be? Do you think that's a lower? Do you think that's going to land pretty much exactly where you thought that it would?
I feel like that came in a little bit low, just a little bit low for the franchise. But then again, I think Fury Road carries, and it's just like, you know, we got the jackpot drop right there, and that's so exciting. But you're right, the rest of the franchise kind of pulls this down, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think we're pretty close.
Be honest, if we did this in 2014, this would be a lot lower score.
100%. And I was like, I agree that the ranking sounds right. And then I was like, oh, I can actually math it out. I have my scores, 73.5 with all in on mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it would get bumped up maybe a point with Furiosa in there. So yeah, I think it's on par. I think it's on par. I think George Miller is a great filmmaker. I think Fury Road is like the pinnacle of his movie making. I don't think he'll ever top that, and I think that's okay because it's a great action movie.
Well, and honestly, like, shoot, I lost it. Mad Max for 1979, for the budget he had and the tools he was working with, is pretty damn good. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Now, by today's standards,
I think my Mad Max was a little higher than yours because of those reasons. Like, he accomplished a lot, and it led to some great things. And maybe that shouldn't be all placed on Mad Max, but kind of has to be a little bit.
Well, and aside from Dan, I believe all of our scores escalated from movie to movie to movie, right? And it just
I only dipped in the second one, and other than that, they went up.
Like, and mine dipped on
Thunderdome. Thunderdome dipped.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I felt.
So yours went up significant. Yours went up consistently, and Will and I both had a movie that dipped. But other than that, they generally went up.
Yeah.
Don't worry, yours will dip when you watch Furiosa.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you for giving me the proper expectation for that movie. I think I can go into that without paying $25, and I think I can walk away really enjoying and just knowing, hey, this isn't going to be Fury Road, the sequel. This is going to be another story in the saga. It's going to be a Mad Max saga, is what it's going to be.
It's a Mad Max.
So yeah. All right, I guess our big question is what franchise comes next, right?
If you're enjoying this, you want to see the edited version or previous episodes, it's not going to be on the same YouTube channel that I play Marvel Strike Force on. That's a different YouTube channel. If you hit !movies in the chat, you'll be brought to my movies channel. That's where you can find all of this content. Please go consider giving that a subscription if you can. It's still very, very low. I'd love to build the numbers up on that. Also, Facebook, if you hit !Facebook, I have to get to 100 followers on that before I can start streaming over there as well. And I'd love to have this show specifically reach this big of an audience as possible. So if you still use Facebook, please consider heading over there, hit the follow button on the Monguli show on that. That would be absolutely amazing. Other than that, leave a comment down below for what you want to see, or I guess in the poll for what you want to see us do next. Probably do this like once a month or so, assuming we can make our schedules work. It's a little tougher with 3 people, but that gives us a chance to have time to watch the movies, quite frankly, because I'm super busy these days, and it's like I'm basically watching for the show more so than for enjoyment at this point. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for hanging out. It's been an absolute blast. You have a great night, and we'll catch you next time on R Rating.
Let's watch the show.